we like to say, as the men go, so goes the household. As the household goes, so goes the nation, right? And I think if we want to have strong churches, we have to win the men to to the gospel and to the excellent life that should flow out of it.
This is not a business where you take polls. It's a business where you think. You're not right or wrong because 1,000 people agree with
you. Michael, great seeing you. Thank you for coming on the podcast. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So I've read your work and your book, been following you for a while, but as I've said in other podcast episodes, you founding kind of Venn diagrams across different circles that usually don't touch each other. So if you want to tell us a little bit about you and sort of your core project, It's Good to Be the book, It's Good to Be a Man, and then we'll launch from there. That'd be great.
These days, I'm kind of a Venn diagram myself, it seems like. But I've been in and out of the ministry in one form or another since I've been about 17. So I got saved when I was 17. I was a junior high youth pastor way too soon. So I've been in youth ministry, church planning, all that stuff for a long time. But in particular, I was doing youth ministry for about 6 years and had a pretty large youth group that a lot of kids came through. And then as they got into their late teens and early 20s, they kept up with me. And they were telling me about the difficulties they were facing out in kind of the relationship marketplace, finding a wife, how women had changed, just all this sort of stuff. And then they were also talking to me about guys like Jordan Peterson and some of these pickup artists and this manosphere and men's rights activists, things that I didn't really know much about. Matter of fact, it was one of my friends who at the time was pretty moderate said, you should really check out Jordan Peterson. Seems like he's talking about some of the things you think about. And so that's how I got introduced to Jordan Peterson. I would say 2016 or 17, something along those, maybe a little bit earlier. But I was like, man, why are all these Christian men listening to these non-Christians? What's going on here? And at the time I ran an online comic book store and I was an associate pastor in the PCA. And half of my day I just spent packing up comics and shipping them off to customers. So I just sit there and listen. I'd listen to all these guys talk and I consumed a ton of it, just trying to, I've always had an interest in sexuality, a little bit more from a kind of more academic standpoint until the last several years, where it's definitely taken a turn towards the practical. But so it was fascinating to me, and some of it was crazy, and a lot of it was kind of salacious, but there was a lot of good stuff there too. And I could see that part of the problem that had happened is that I like to tell people there was like a tsunami. And so tsunamis, the waters rush in and destroy things, and then they pull them back out to sea. And what some of the older generations don't realize, what once was kind of folk wisdom that everyone knew, ideas that everyone kind of just absorbed from the culture, had been washed away. And that younger generation didn't know how to shake hands and look people in their eyes. And that younger generation grew up with high definition porn and life mediated through screens. Their mom and dad, while their mom and dad was like bathing them, the mom and dad was staring at an iPad, right? And ignoring them. They're a generation that grew up with that sort of stuff that really me and anyone older didn't experience, because I still had a pretty decent span of my life that was spent at analog. Digital was coming, but it wasn't commonplace. It wasn't part of everything. We still had card catalogs, and there still was, coin operated phone booths you'd run to. I always tell people, if you want to capture the technological changes that have happened during the lifetime of Gen X, a good show to do it is to watch like the first episode or two of X-Files and the last episode or two of X-Files, because they really run from the early 90s all the way up to, I think, like 2018, they had a revival of the show. So you got like Mulder running to print something off, and it's printing off with the little things you had to rip off the side of the pages. And he's, and it's supposed to be really high def picture and just looks so silly, and that's huge change, right? The internet is on par with the Industrial Revolution and how it's shifted things. And we're still in the early days. And now we have AI coming, which is going to really change a lot of the white collar work, anything. Like I think if you're an insurance agent, you're going to be in a world of hurt pretty soon. A lot of low end copywriters, editors, whatever that, we're just at, what is it, ChatGPT 4 or something like that. I mean,
Yeah.
the next iteration is going to be so far ahead of anything anyone can imagine. I use a lot of that stuff to get work done, and it's intense. And so the world's changed in ways that older generations have a hard time comprehending, and what it did to relationships, what it did to men and women. Like dating apps have been incredibly destructive for women. Instagram's been incredibly destructive for women. It really appeals to kind of their vanity and the idea that there's all these 1 percentile men out there that they can all get a hold of, regardless of kind of their real world attributes. And then for guys, pornography, it really has lowered their testosterone. It's lowered their drive. It's created weird expectations. It's created a lot of shame around sexuality that makes them kind of a toothless tiger, if anything at all. Then even the gamer sort of culture that's developed. These games these days, these video games are built to hack male neurology, right? And it's not like when I was a kid, we didn't have any limits on video games. How long can you keep dying at Kid Icarus and not have a password save where you just want to go play football instead, right? We just go outside and play. Now, if I say, son, go out and play with the kids, there's no kids out there. They're all online. Like if I'm dooming my son to like loneliness at some level, unless you're in a community that's really cultivating that. So people are kind of socially awkward. Everything in terms of communication is done through mediation, whether it's text messages. Like back when I was a kid, you would never break up with someone by text unless it was meant to be disrespectful, right? Generally, you would just break up with them. It's like it's not me, it's you. So, all that stuff changed, and as I'm watching these pickup artists. And pickup artistry is really this kind of a short-term strategy to have sex with women. It doesn't lead to anything remotely close to a Christian view of sexuality. The reason I think it did appeal, that it helped these guys understand things that are attractive to women, and they could fake them for a night, especially if they're going to like a bar or something with kind of low-quality women that have had something to drink. Pickup artistry doesn't lead to marriage or any sort of stability. And you see that in a lot of the guys who wrote all the books on it. Like probably the most famous book is The Game, which I wasn't able to finish. It just got too wicked. But there's this scene in there where, actually, I bet I have it on my phone. I'm actually getting ready to write an article for Fight Laugh Feast, and I'm going to put this in there. We'll see if they let me keep it in there. I tried to get the word fag into something with Canon, and Canon kicked it out.
Those guys are pretty fiery, so they should. They should. They
made me do fop instead, and I was like, man, fop is such a homeschooler word. All right, this is from page 21 and 22 of The Game by Neil Strauss. As mystery, so all these pickup artists have like superhero names. It's like really nerdy. As mystery dissected the alpha male further, I realized something. The reason I was here, the reason Sweater and Extra Mask was also here, was that our parents and our friends had failed us. They had never given us the tools we needed to become fully effective social beings. Now, decades later, it was time to acquire them. I find that to be a very honest quote. So what Neil Strauss is saying is that he saw learning pickup artistry, these kind of, they call it game, as if he had been a normal social being, if he had been raised right through his family and his friends, he would possess those abilities, but now he's got to learn it from this other guy. He's actually kind of right. So the things that women find attractive are the direct consequence of a healthy household. having a mom, a dad, having people that drive you, growing up in a low conflict, stable household where there are familial traditions and values, where there's accountability, responsibility, where you have to get your homework done. My son has a paper due end of this month and he doesn't want to do it. And I was like, well, you are going to do it. You have to have parents that tell you things like that. Like, since when does wanting to do something that needs to be done have anything to do with getting it done? You're going to get it done one way or another. So if he had grown up with that sort of self-confidence that comes from being disciplined and loved by a father, he would have a lot of easier time relating to women. And so I think why pickup artistry and men's rights activists and all this stuff, Jordan Peterson, started to appeal to this generation is this was a generation that was largely fatherless. So either there was no dad or the dad himself had abdicated. Perhaps the dad didn't really know how to be a dad. That's the case with my father. My father has been in my life the majority of it. I lived with my grandmother for a couple of years, but my dad always loved me. He was always proud of me. He didn't beat me or anything like that. He didn't do a very good job at teaching me how to be a man. Remember, his advice was, son, punch them when I was getting bullied. He says, punch them in their nose. It'll make their eyes water. So that's Proverbs by Fred Foster. Punch them in their eyes. It'll make their eyes water. So I think there's a whole generation of people that had dads that didn't know. So my grandfather was a cult leader. He wrote a bunch of new age books and was a very abusive man and molested some of my cousins. And that's who my dad had as a dad. My dad didn't do any of those things to me, right? My dad loved me. So he took the ball as far as he could, but that wasn't very far. And I think a lot of guys grew up with dads. They don't want to say, like, I'm fatherless or I hate my dad, but their dad still abdicated and didn't teach them some of the things that are central to manhood. I was talking to a notorious red pill guy on the phone once. His name's Rollo Tomasi. And I told him, it was a pleasant phone call, but I told him that I thought, and I think this might have offended him, but I thought that everything in his book, The Rational Male, you could have found that wisdom in any 1920s bar, just with the people there. Because it's such basic stuff, but we live in a stupid time, right? That's the reality. We live in this. There's real consequences when you break down the family union, when you divorce, procreation from sex from marriage. All these things have consequences. We're seeing it right now. A lot of ADHD is this: someone didn't tell the kid to shut up. I saw a clip from South Park, and this guy's gonna cure ADHD, and it's just by smacking the kid in the back of the head and telling him to get to work. That offends our modern minds, but there's some truth to it, right? And that it's just these people have not been disciplined, and there's a lack of loving, formative, and corrective discipline in our culture, and that's leading to chaos. So as I studied all that, I came up with this idea of it's good to be a man, because I used to run this 2 miles a day with my wife after I got off work. I'd run, and the turning point on the track I'd run, we ran through neighborhoods, was a house, the Goodman's house. And so every time I saw that, just to keep myself motivated, I'd be like, yeah, it's good to be a man. And I thought, yeah, it's kind of catchy. And what's so funny is I've heard people tell me that they thought it was like this purposely provocative title. Like, that's not why I did that. I thought, why don't we lean into the positivity instead of talking about, complementarians are like obsessed with what women can do, right? I wanted to talk about what's good about masculinity, what's good about God's design for the man. Let's lean into that, because we have all this toxic masculinity, all this negativity pointed towards maleness. So I really wanted to frame it in terms of the goodness of God's design with a particular emphasis on men. And that's where that book came from. And it first started as a series of podcasts with my friend Non Tennant. And we had this kind of ambitious project of like a systematic theology of masculinity. And then the more we interacted with guys, we realized that it really needed to take a little bit more of a practical focus, and maybe give them some big ideas like productive households and the importance of mission and androgyny and what a white knight is. Some of these concepts, it's cool to see these things talked about openly these days online. So, I feel like the book really helped move some of those ideas together. And I hope other people will take them and perfect them and expand them to be helpful um, beyond kind of this current moment that we're in. So that's a little bit on that. That project's over. We did 75 podcasts. The book sold very well. We were the a number one bestseller in Presbyterianism on Amazon and Lutheranism for a while, which was really funny. But it's been a fun ride and allowed me to meet a lot of guys, and it's amazing to see how just a little bit of faithfulness can help a lot of people. So that's been my main project. I'm a pastor, a bivocational pastor. All my work comes out of a desire to help men in my church, help families in my church. I despise celebrity Christendom. I will do everything I can to mess with it. But I just really want to see stable churches. We like to say, as the men go, so goes the household. As the household goes, so goes the nation. Right. And I think if we want to have strong churches, we have to win the men to sort of to the gospel and to the excellent life that should flow out of it.
No, that's awesome. I mean, there's so much there. Thank you for that intro. Uh, I remember, and you talk about this in your book and your podcasts and tweets, but thankfully this hasn't been the case in our church and the churches that my wife and I have been a part of. But go to, just you think of a church in general. You ask guys, why don't they go to church? You really push them, and it's not because they think it's weird. It's not even because they don't necessarily think that the supernatural doesn't exist or anything like that. In many cases, if you really push them, like, why don't you go to church? They say, well, it's a place for women. It's kind of soft. The guys there are just kind of there's nothing there for me. I don't want to be like any of those guys, and that's unfortunately becomes sort of the standard in
Absolutely.
the guys' minds of how the church works, the kind of men that it produces. So soft, doughy, unambitious men.
So
Facts.
Michael, yeah, facts, straight up. So you're a bivocational pastor. We were talking the other week. You get a lot of things done and a lot of different things done on a weekly basis. So you're doing a lot, but you've also done many things over the course of your career. What was your journey like from 18-year-old Michael all the way to current Michael? And how did you piece together, like, what is my vocation? What am I meant to do here?
Well, I mean, I can tell you how it happened. Everyone expects, I mean, you just kind of throw yourself into life. Everyone wants to have a plan. So I met Emily at a Bible study, and she was cute and wanted to marry her. And so we got to know each other, and we started dating back in April 24th of 1999, coming up on almost 25 years of being a couple, 20 years of marriage. But, her father-in-law, being a reasonable man, thought I should have a job. And I started out at NKU studying history and English. So I joined the IBEW, which is a electricians union, but I sucked at it. And you can be bad at a lot of things, but not electrician. So I quit that and went back to college, and then started a job at Citibank. And at Citibank, I wanted to work in customer service, but they didn't have any positions, so they put me into collections. And so collections is like reverse sales, trying to, you're the law of Moses. You're letting these people know that they got to pay it back, and you wouldn't need them to see that it's beneficial for them to work with you. Turned out I was really good at it. So I was like a top collector there. And then I took a job working for one of Sallie Mae's collection agencies. And there I was their number one guy for a long time. So I remember I was working directly for the VP there when I was like 21 or something. And then I did so well that I was making well over six figures back then. And I come from a very poor family. I was just good at talking. I don't fluster. I don't, pretty cool under pressure is how I'm wired. And then I quit the job, and they said, "Is there any way we can talk you into staying?" And I said, sure, let me create my own position. And believe it or not, they did. So then I worked as a contractor for them and created a position, trained. And then at that point, I found out like, if you're really good at something, you can start to demand what you want and build a kind of a free life. And I was willing to take risk. Another risk that I took is a friend of mine became part of a notorious card counting team. So he was a professional card counter for blackjack, and he asked me to join. There's a movie all about this, if you really care, called Holy Rollers: A True Story of Christian Card Counting, which I'm a much younger me. I'm in it. So, but there I tested out, joined this card counting team, and flew all over the country, getting banned from casinos and winning and losing hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then I've run my own comic book store. I sold 50,000 comic books a month online. I think I just learned that if you're willing to go learn and push yourself, you can do a whole lot. It's going to all sound kind of corny, man.
Yep.
The problem, a lot of guys, is that they just will figure it out. It's like, if you want to get from the East Coast to the West Coast, just head west, right? Like
Yeah.
you'll find your path along the way, and you'll learn a lot of things. And I think like books like On the Road by Jack Kerouac, why books like those appeal to guys is that men want to go on an adventure and figure things out. And I don't think a lot of us end up being who we thought we're going to be. A lot of the freshmen, I think, change your major several times within the first 2 years. I think that's natural. You have this idea of what you'll like, and then you do it, and then you don't like it. And so I wouldn't be one of these guys to say, follow your passion. I wouldn't want to do that, I think. But I do think just going at having drive and ambition and not taking no for an answer, and people will tell you what's possible. So far, my entire life feels impossible according to what people tell me. And I never should have got as far as I did. I remember, here's the story I've told people. This is a true story. So they're trying to get me to take Spanish, or no, French. I already took Spanish, but they wanted me to take, they wanted me to take Spanish to Spanish like 3 to get into college. This is my guidance counselor in public school trying to like, you got to take Spanish 3. I was like, I barely passed Spanish 2. Well, do you want to get into college? Like, not really. And then she said, Michael, I just don't think you're going to go anywhere in life. That's what she said to me, which in retrospect, I respect that people back then could still say things like that. And I said, that might be true, but I know one thing. She's like, what's that? At least I won't be a guidance counselor when I grow up. And then I just think, people tell you what you can and can't do, what's possible. And that's part of the problem for like these guys living online, is that they're looking for this like really clear cut plan. And that's the only thing they'll follow, as opposed to kind of throwing yourself into life. That's where virtue's made, taking risk. It's okay to fail. I think everyone's so scared of failing. How many successful businessmen haven't failed a bunch? It's like part of the process, right? That's why guys can't get married. They're scared they're going to get rejected. So what? If she rejects you, she doesn't get the quality she's missing out on. That's not your fault. That's her fault. Be polite, move on. And so I think failure, I'd just say I've just always been a risk taker, and I've gotten burned for it plenty of times. They weren't all wins, man. Like there was ideas that were bad ideas. And, but I found out what I was good at, and I was a communicator, and I started to lean into those gifts, and it's opened a lot of doors to me.
Michael, along those lines, so how do you balance, coming from a kind of a, you mentioned you have you come from a poor background, and sort of a broken. Is it your home was broken, or was your father's home broken?
Our home was pretty broken. Yeah, my dad wasn't mean to me, but he and my mother, they fought like every day. I could remember. remember. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was
So
not
how
good.
do you, in many ways, like that kind of environment, if a man, comes out the other side of a high pressure environment like that, not bitter and not broken himself, that's a mercy, obviously, but it also equips him in a good
Absolutely.
way to observe the world, to have certain insight and wisdom. So how do you think you can produce, not you personally, but how do you think men can be produced who can have that kind of fruit and ability to see the world and observe and pattern recognition, all that stuff, without having to go through the meat grinder themselves? Yeah,
So, how can they be productive without coming from a broken home, or how can they be productive when they come from a broken home?
I guess if I want to reframe the question, is that what kind of adversity do you think is helpful, and how do you foster that? The kind of pressure that develops men with wisdom and
Oh yeah,
ambition versus
sure.
the adversity that creates bitterness and a brokenness.
Yeah. Well, bitterness is your choice, right? Bitterness is your response to a situation. And so the way to get over bitterness is to take responsibility for yourself and say that, that wasn't my fault, but I'm going to move on. I think so. Like, I remember one day I saw my son, Cyprian, my youngest son, trying to carry up a I don't know why he was doing this. It was a big, heavy can of paint, trying to carry it up the stairs. And I was thinking, if that kid drops that and that paint goes everywhere, this is going to be chaos. But he was really struggling. And so I wanted to help him. But I did it because it's good that I struggled it. And then I asked him why he did it. He's like, I'm just bringing it upstairs. He just wanted to do it, right? Which was cool to see this little 5-year-old dragging this heavy paint can up the stairs. And so I think the sort of adversity that really helps people is parents not giving the kids space, right? Let them climb a tree, let them fall and break an arm. Not everyone's going to fall out of a tree and break their neck. I know this one kid did this one time. So what? Right? Not everyone's going to. Like, we all live in fear of the like 0.5% of a chance. Like, I remember in the 80s, we thought everyone was going to kidnap us. There was a guy in with his puppies and candy and trench coat in a van looking around. Truth is, it's like what, 2,000 kids get kidnapped a year, and it's almost all by has to do with child custody disputes, right? So one is to have parents. What helps them is parents that just don't shield them from all adversity. Another thing you can do as a man is things like weightlifting, things like cold showers, things like working overtime, things like having 2 jobs. These are real practical things. With my son, who doesn't want to write this paper right now, I said, you don't want to write this paper because you're not much of a writer. You don't enjoy it. And that's why you should do it. And he's like, well, I won't have to do this later in life. I was like, later in life, you'll absolutely have to research issues and summarize them and report on them in some way, right? It may not be a research paper, but the basic skills are there, and you just don't want to do it because it's hard. I mean, are you just going to quit because it's hard? And so throwing yourself into doing difficult things, pushing yourself out there. A lot of the things that traumatize and embitter people, some of it's their own choices. It's usually related to bad habits like addictions. But a lot of that stuff kind of comes on you, right? Your dad dies at a young age. Um, your girlfriend cheats on you or whatever. Those are things that you don't really have a lot of control over, that sort of adversity. But even that adversity shapes who you are. The death of my daughter was probably one of the most significant events in my entire life. And I remember that we had 3 kids, and I didn't want to have any more kids and now we've had 8, but I didn't want to have any more kids because they cost a lot of money, like not as much as people say, but they do cost money. And I felt like we're just having kids too quick. And I thought we're going to have 100 kids because every time I just would wink at Emily, she'd get pregnant. Right. And so she gets pregnant with a girl, and I never thought we'd have girls because we had 3 boys at first. And then everything's fine to the day of her due date, and the baby's heart just stops and dies. And it was such a check on my pride, thinking that we can choose how many kids we have, and forgetting that God opens and closes the womb, and tragedies happen and all this stuff. It really brought a ton of humility into my life, and actually gave me kind of my emotional range back. Because having grown up in the house I grew up, I was a pretty sensitive kid, and there was so much screaming and fighting. If you're sensitive, you end up shutting your emotions down so you can survive in that intense circumstance. And it was kind of like you hear about these guys that fall down and they're blind, and then they fall down again later in life to get their sight back. And it was like going through that pain with Nicaea dying, reawoken emotions in me, and awakened, not awoken, awakened emotions in me. And it gave me a deeper level of sympathy and ability to connect with people. And so I don't know, to fully answer your question, choose hard things to do, but also choose to see that God works through hard things you didn't choose to make you into a stronger, more versatile person. And for a time, it might really hurt, and you might be in a sort of weakened state, and that's how we were with that baby dying. But on the other end, my mom had this stroke these last couple of weeks. I've been really busy with that. My ability to sit there and look at my mom with cords and pipes and all these things going into her, and keep cool and trust the Lord. Like that's partially because of having gone through the death of a child already. And it makes you a stronger person, and a lot helps you react to things in a more godly way. So yeah, life is hard, man. This whole planet's fallen. It's all messed up. Like, I always think it's hilarious, or sad maybe, when people. I used to believe in God and something bad happened. Like, what? Well, you were an idiot back then, right? What do you mean? What do you think the good news is for? The good news is for a bad situation, man. And that's why our hope is in the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and not in this world. The super spiritual pietism makes us say that the world doesn't matter, right? Physical things don't matter. That's wrong. But the only way to have a right attitude towards the things that God has made is to anchor it in its eternal purpose, right? Looking forward to the perfect world to come. And I think when you have that mindset, you can get through adversity for the glory of God. And that's the whole idea of, like, James 1, right? These trials, you don't have to enjoy the trials. The joy that you're counting those trials that you're falling into is that they're going to make you perfect, right? Complete, mature, not lacking anything. They're going to produce all these virtues in you. So I think cultivating an attitude that all things come from God's hand. If you don't believe in the sovereignty of God, you probably will be pretty bitter eventually. Even these non-Christians, like, they're kind of positive people. If it's not a show, you'll hear them saying, they'll attribute it to, like, the purpose of the universe or something, right? And I think that's the key. What they're kind of sensing is that there is a benevolent intelligence behind all things. But if you're not washing the blood of his son, he's not going to be benevolent on Judgment Day.
You talk about spiritual pietism that gets you kind of out of the world. I think maybe in your book you connect this to androgyny and Gnosticism in some sense, where it doesn't matter what you are, how you're built. It's just everything's spiritual. Do you see a parallel there with the hyper online world that we live in, where a lot of men, they, I mean, most of our jobs we can now make a lot of money just sitting in front of a keyboard and tapping things with our fingers. Like, I don't even have to stand up. I can just move 4 fingers and I can make a lot of money. And that's pretty wild. And you don't use a lot of the things that make you a man to do that, to conquer worlds. So how do you, let me add one more thing and then I'll ask you a question. So I think as I look at the right-wing manosphere, Twitter and beyond, there's guys like BAP and Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson, all these guys. A lot of criticism, obviously, of the wide range and spectrum of those guys. But one of the things that I think they get right is this critique of modernity as a sort of a difficult place for men to exercise their manhood. Maybe that's just the summary of it. So how do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, so this again, kind of like porn. Porn doesn't. So real sex involves the all sorts of fluids and mess and smell, and sheets have to be changed, and someone didn't actually shave their arms, and there's people aren't perfectly balanced. They don't have the same size breasts. They don't have, like, you just go right down the line of the reality of sex and the unreality of hand-picked, perky teenagers or whatever, and sex that just like happens like that, you know, and a woman that's always just like apparently just in heat or something. That guys like that. That's not real though, and the reason they like that is that's the height of what they want. But pornography pulls them out of the world, and has them aim their sexual passions towards something that produces nothing. It doesn't tie in a marital covenant. It doesn't. You know, one of the great benefits of sex is that it's a source of comfort for both spouses, right? It allows them to face this difficult world, find comfort. There's a hormonal release on both sides. Another benefit of sex is it produces children, right? Porn doesn't do any of that. Video games, it doesn't do any of that either. Like video games, it's dominion, right? And it's dominion where you get to play by fake rules. You don't actually have to play the rules of the creation, of the actual creation, and so you can kind of like live out the creation mandate without the full thorns and thistles, without that. And so, uh, Facebook, you can become Facebook and Twitter. You can become like this guy that has it all figured out. This guru. I can't tell you how many gurus I've met in my time that are out there like telling people how to get married and they're not married, and telling people how to raise their kids and they got like a 1 year old. Some guys out there you find out they're telling like people how to get it in like shape and they're super fat. You know, like I'm not in the best shape of my life, but you never heard me say, here's how to get down to 7% body fat. I mean, come on. And that's like guys like, Aaron Renn will say, he only writes about things he knows. One of his principles is live not by lies, kind of playing off Dreher. And so these guys, they'll act like they have it all together online. And how often you meet these pastors that are like know-it-alls, and their church is like 10 people. And and not that a church can't be 10 people, but it is interesting that all this great wisdom doesn't translate to fruit in your actual life. Um, and so what I see is something that should be a supplement to the world, being treated as like macronutrients, right? And I think the internet's awesome. I think it's great. I think AI is good. Obviously, all technology can do bad things. I don't doubt that AI could result in some major problems down the line, but I don't think it's going to be Skynet. I'm not buying that. So I think technology is good, if it's used rightly. And the problem is now where there's a sort of, you don't have to be who you really are online. You don't actually have to win a woman to you. You just push play, right? I mean, so that's why OnlyFans makes all that money, right? So these are women, these are like normal looking chicks making like $30,000 a month. Like, why? Why would guys do that? Porn's free online. Why in the world would you ever pay all this money? You'll see these girls say, "Oh, I wish someone would pay my rent." Some guy will pay their rent right away. And you're like, what in the world? Well, it's because they want a relationship. They want an emotional connection. They want to feel like they actually know this person. They're trying to recreate in the matrix the thing that they desire. But it will never work. It can't work. We're made to be embodied, right? It's the same thing. These guys that are awesome at video games come and go. And really, the most successful pro gamers are just marketers, really smart marketers. They make all their money off marketing products and whatever. They're actually not. It seems like they're paid to game, but it's more they're paid to market. And so I think there's this huge move to create fake things, but they don't give us any of the benefits, none of the fruits, none of the actual skills. Like what, some Call of Duty guy? That's who I want with me in the trenches. Like, does he know how guns work just because he played? I mean, maybe he understands like flanking maneuvers or whatever, but if he gets out of breath trying to do it, that doesn't help. And so there's just a removal. I think it's like transgenderism to some degree, like that your limits, your physicality, your biology, that you can pretend, and online you can pretend. I remember when I worked as a salesman and Verizon, and this guy was trying to help me get some sort of pay app on his phone to pay his girlfriend over in Africa. And me not always recognizing social boundaries, I said to him, his name was Thomas. I said, Thomas, can I tell you something that I don't think anyone else is going to tell you? And he was like, sure. I was like, this isn't a chick. This is a dude. I promise you, this is a guy that stole a bunch of pictures of a chick somewhere, and you guys have been chatting back and forth, and he's been milking you for money. And oh no, that would never happen. He probably knew in his heart, but he wanted to pretend. He wanted to feel loved and whatever. So you're like online, you're not bound by anything. You're not bound by, your physicality. And so I think it encouraged, these guys, like, you see these fight videos. Do you guys get suckered into those on Twitter? Is it just me? Every once in a while, there's like a Twitter account that comes like street fights, and it's like guys like knocking each other out. And then I go down the video on accident. I'm like, this is not productive. But there's always that one guy that just thinks he's like gonna kick butt or whatever because he played Mortal Kombat or watched a bunch of stuff, and he just gets like laid out. And I think we're getting laid out. We think we understand all this stuff, but we've never learned how to fix a car or cut wood. And maybe we did once upon a time and then forgot it because we got absorbed into it. But it's a real danger right now. It's like a false creation where we can act like we're living out our design, right? The creation mandate, but not have any real dominion and not produce any real fruit. It's all just transitory.
Yeah, that is very interesting. I think you talk about. I guess I'll frame it as a question. If I'm thinking of one of the early chapters of your book where you talk about the war between the patriarchies, and it's not. I think you framed it in such a way where it basically gets to the point of it's not whether you will have fathers or patriarchy, or and downstream from that, it's not whether you'll have men or not. It's what kind of men or which kind of father, which kind of patriarchy. So if this generation is sort of losing the basics of what it means to be a man and what it means to teach other men to be men, what do you think is replacing that? What's becoming the new father, the new patriarch of the age?
Government is the number one thing. So you can think of authority as energy, and all authority is delegated authority, except for the authority that comes directly from God, right? So God delegates some of his authority to the officers in the church. He delegates authority to the civil magistrate. He delegates authority to the heads of households. Authority can neither be created nor destroyed in a sense. It just goes somewhere else. So, for example, if a dad doesn't do a good job raising his kids and doesn't discipline his kids and abdicates that, then his kids will inevitably become some sort of, unless there's some grace of God, right, some sort of intervention, they'll end up the ward of the church or the state in some way, right? So the state is paying food stamps because dad won't provide. The church now creates a youth group out of a desire to make sure that these kids are getting some discipleship that should normally come at home. Nonetheless, that authority that was in that man ends up absorbed by some other institution. And so the state has gobbled up all this authority because men's abdicated and churches abdicated. And the problem is that we now have to figure out how to pull that authority back to us. So some of the nasty parts of the patriarchy movement is where those guys won't give any authority to the church, won't recognize it, and are trying to pull back what did belong to them, but they're overcompensating. And so those are those families where everything is kind of the society of the home church, home birth, home education, home everything. And so I think the government is the number one patriarch right now. And that's evil. That's bad. So we think of that more of a nanny state, right? Because of the way the government tells you is kind of a nagging sort of thing. But in terms of like who's in charge, like as Americans, we know government doesn't give us rights. He didn't give me anything. God did. You protect those rights. That's your only purpose is to protect the rights. That's like radical in the rest of the country or the globe for a lot of people. They really think that the government grants them rights, like they have the authority to give those things. Like, who gave you that authority, right? So that's one. The other thing is influencers. Is another. I was thinking about how many influencers monetize fatherlessness and friendlessness. I was thinking about this time in my life, whereas towards the end of my first church plant, and I was just really lonely. I was card counting, so there wasn't a lot of people to talk to about that way of life, especially when you're church planting. But I started watching like the second season of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia that had Danny DeVito on it, and a lot of that stuff could be pretty vile, but I was always drawn back to it during that kind of season of my life. And I was like, what is it that I like so much about this? And then I realized what I liked about it is the way the guys bickered back and forth and teased each other. Because it reminded me how me and my friends like totally insulted each other and gave each other such a hard time, but actually loved each other. And I realized like, man, I'm lonely. That's what this is about. And I think there's podcasts where people just talk in circles. It's like the first 15 minutes of the podcast are guys talking about their week. And I'm like, dude, I don't care. Can you like do the interview or get to the content? But a lot of people love that stuff. It's like morning talk radio. Like I hate morning talk radio. I got to listen to like 20 minutes of two guys and some chick talking about nonsense just so I could hear one Led Zeppelin song, you know? And then I'm thinking to myself, what is this? People are lonely. People want friends. They want their cheers. They want the bar they go to. And we're monetizing that. We're monetizing fatherlessness. Hey, get my Gumroad class. Join my online fraternity, right? Um, and and that just tells you that's where people are going, and that's the last thing people need. So people need to get in a good church. They need to develop some crew of guys somehow, um, and so that's where a lot of things are happening now, right now online. I don't think it's going to stay there. I think we'll figure out the internet in time. It might take a couple decades, but I think a little quicker than that. I noticed that a lot of the younger generations have a different relationship with social media than, say, like 25 and up. Um, they just don't seem, they just seem different to me. And there's some real bad stuff, but I notice a lot just they don't spend as much time on aspects of social media. I've been seeing that in some of these young men. And when they do, it's usually kind of like in the sort of hustle porn sort of stuff, like get in shape, motivational stuff, whatever. And I've seen this with a lot of young men and even girls. Just a lot of the stuff they listen to pushes them into the gym. And so there's like a whole new like kind of gym culture developing right now. What's up with these chicks with these big legs though, man? Since when did a guy want to see a woman with like, it's like the women have big legs and the guys have small legs. These CrossFit chicks that look like gorillas. But but all that stuff's pushing these kids back in. So I do think there's some sort of maturing going on right now, related to the internet, and because it's just empty after a while. They get sad and depressed, and guys like Tate, some of these guys online, they say a lot of evil stuff, but what you do find is some of these guys champion getting out in the world. And that's why there's some good effects coming from it, whether Christians want to believe it or not.
What do you think about guys like Jordan Peterson? Obviously, I mean, there's been multiple phases of Peterson of coming onto the scene, absolute top. Everyone was talking about him everywhere all the time. Medical issues, coming back now. He's kind of with the Daily Wire doing other things. What's your take on his impact and his work?
Yeah, it's too bad it's with the Daily Wire. You can't trust the Daily Wire for anything. There's some really good people there, some really good reporters. Their editing room on the written side of things is full of fantastic people. A lot of Christians. They're still willing to break some worthwhile story, but they do bow down to the zeitgeist of the day, like when it comes to like Dave Rubin and a gay guy adopting kids, and there's little things you see like that, that show you what's happening, where the power structure still lies, right? So I'm sorry to see him do that. I do think that Jordan Peterson, for the moment, is kind of a net positive. Early on, I think it was a little more. Um, but fame and money is a corrosive, and you always have to be careful with it. I do think, having had just a little bit of the public eye on me and pressure, I'm not shocked that his medical problem, really, which is clear. It sounds like he just got addicted to drugs because he was pushed
Right.
beyond. He was it, man. He was like the world's uncle or
He
dad for a
was.
season,
Yeah.
right? And having some of that on me was enough to me think like, I don't want this. I've got a wife and kids and a real job. I don't need any of this. I don't even care. And so his willingness to go out there and fight and push and have a spine and be brave, that sort of early Jordan Peterson. And even though like he would get all wiggly and weird on some topics, that version of him I think was super helpful to a lot of young men. Since he's come back, it's still generally good. It's still generally okay stuff, but I think we're in a transition right now. Bap's never been the same since he got banned and came back, and now he just does all sorts of weird stuff. He was always kind of homoerotic, and he was pretending like that was a joke, but I don't think it's a joke. I don't think it's a joke at all. It's too weird. And then he's like posting all these like half naked like anime characters. I'm like, what is with this? And he's not been the same. Royal Tomasi's not been the same. I think Tate was kind of peak manosphere. And I think it peaked earlier this year. And then I don't think it can stand the scrutiny of the public eye at this level. And some of that stuff starting to kind of come to surface. And so I think we're moving to something different right now in terms of that. As long as there's men looking for help and there's men online offering it, the manosphere, right, is going to be around. But it does strike me as there, like the last year or so, this kind of goes with COVID too, a little bit. Like there was like a COVID phase. It feels like 2016 to 2022 was like its own little micro era. And something happened last year that I've been watching. There's like a different vibe. And Aaron Wren and I have talked about it. Haven't really
Yeah,
been able
he
to.
called it the vibe shift, I think.
Did he really? Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
I think
Like,
he was on the podcast second episode, and I'm pretty sure I read an article of his on the Substack called the vibe
okay, cool.
shift. So look
Well, we
it
were
up.
talking about it several months ago, and he's like, "Do you think the vibe shifts?" I was like, "It has shifted." I don't fully know, but I think people are trying to build platforms off kind of red pill content or the pandemic or whatever. It feels super dated. Bat feels super dated. The whole like spelling friend wrong and all that sort of weird. Um, I loved reading Bat back in the day, like the book, because it was just so strange and interesting. And like so much of it was like BS, and I couldn't tell when he was being satirical or not. It was like really, and I think maybe he doesn't know, right? Maybe the whole game is like act super deep and complicated, and no one can know if you're full of it or not. But that's shifted. It's going somewhere, and I think it's because the internet can't deliver. AI or like it's interesting. Meta went nowhere. Some of this stuff just I don't know if it's too early or it just can't happen. Like I always tell people, like how if we could only have gay sex, if the whole world was gay, how long would that world last? One generation, right? One generation. Because if you rebel against God, so think of patriarchy being like gravity is not a bad example. Is that you can, we can pull away from gravity for a time, but it's going to pull us back, right? And so we can twist. You can't smash the patriarchy because it's part of God's cosmos, but you can augment it for a time. And I feel like some of the stuff we've been watching is kind of running our course, and where we're going next, I don't know. I've kind of backed out a little bit where I'm like, I've said my piece. I've said what I need to say. I feel like we hit the big issues that I thought were pretty helpful issues without getting really bogged down in some of the more messy, preferential, and just needlessly controversial stuff. And so where we're going to go, we'll find out. I think we're in the middle of it right now.
Yeah, it's definitely a time where I think a lot of promises from a lot of angles are coming up empty. promise of liberalism, promise of the internet as a great deliverer. And it's to your point earlier, I'm not dismissing the internet as a technology. I think it's phenomenal and it's going to continue to evolve. We just had, shameless plug, we just had John Stokes on the previous episode to talk about AI, and it was a great episode. Everybody should listen to it. But yeah, a lot of promises that were kind of stacked are all of a sudden not there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. In terms of the vibe shift, I mean, AI is a huge component of that was unexpected. You had the COVID inspired vibe shift. But again, talking with John Stokes last week, the possibilities for AI are very weird and very uncertain. And it's hard to say where it's going to go.
I think part of it is that it also shuffles the board in a weird way, where, to your point, and Michael, I think 2016 to 2020, it was sort of the apex of the white collar work, no work from home at the time, but, frothy markets, Silicon Valley, like, killing it if you're in a public, this, that, and the other. And all of a sudden AI comes around, and guess what? AI workers white collar workers are on the chopping block. Blue collar suddenly much more. And that's just a reshuffling that you couldn't expect.
It was like the learn to code meme. Like,
right.
Kind of screwed now, right?
That's right. And not just the learn to code meme, but so closely in time, in terms of the timeline, so closely following the work from home, white collar workers get treated with they get to keep their jobs, they get to do whatever they want. The pandemic destroys everybody else, but you can zoom into a half-hour meeting at Google from your apartment in New York and you're okay. All of a sudden, 2 years later, 3 years later, boom, board gets reshuffled. Now you're better off as an electrician or starting to make plans to get out of copywriting than get a cushy job at Meta or whatever. I want to talk. So I really want to get to brotherhood if we have time. That's. I know you've written a lot about that, and it's one of the certainly topics of the day. But before we get to that, getting to something you've also talked about, the ministerial crisis. I'm mostly curious about this, having spent a lot of time around pastors and around guys who are training to be pastors. So it seems to me that, I mean, you talked about your experience, your background earlier. You have what I would call real world experience or street cred. You've built things. You've done. You've built businesses and have kids and all this stuff. And you're also a pastor, written books, all that. If I sort of take a step back and think of the pastoral track, how do you become a pastor these days? You're sort of just this intellectual guy. Like, you get the equivalent. I think of, in my mind, the equivalent of a guy that goes and gets a bachelor's in international business and then an MBA, and then he's suddenly a consultant telling you how to run your business. But he's never
done
in
it
the
before.
World, right? So, but there's some. As I was thinking through this, it seems to me like there's some parallels to how pastors are trained these days, where you're just an intellectual. You never gotten your knuckles bloody. You've never run with a ball or got punched in the face or built something or failed. What do you think about that? Like, what would you, in your mind, what would the ideal pastoral training pipeline or method look like?
Well, one thing to keep in mind is that, in one sense, everyone's always kind of been bivocational until recently. People had like livestock or gardens or bunch of, they had other, like, even some of if the pastor has a really popular, like I was pointing this out to some of the guys in Moscow, I was like, well, you got 5 lot feast. That's like bivocational. It's a big deal, so it's all, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But once upon a time, like, guys, they had lots, I was thinking about John Adams. If you watch that show, I love that show, the miniseries. But he's like, they got a farm and he's law and politician. Everyone's doing a little bit of everything, right? And that was life for a long time for everybody. And I think pastors, maybe John Calvin did just do 40 hours of pastoral work, but he did a bunch of other things, right? And that's why I always tell, like, I don't know a pastor that does 30 hours of pastoral work these days, really, not very many anyhow. Like, you and I know some really good guys, but I think the problem is people are weak and soft, and you can't be soft to be a pastor. And so I'd like to see them come from a good family, and if not from a good family, from some sort of challenging background. I remember this guy once told me he's going to get a degree to be a youth pastor. And I was like, well, why? And he said, well, I love youth. I was like, well, go. Since when do you need a degree in youth pastoring? I'm like, what a pointless degree, man. Go get a real degree. In what? Anything but youth ministry. Gosh, it's like cheese, making cheese is more productive than that, right? Like, I don't know, youth ministry, gender studies, they're about equal in my mind, in their pointlessness. And so he quit, and he went and took over his dad's car dealership. Probably, I don't know how it played out years later, but for the moment, it was a good idea. But actually, learn, like, the reason so many pastors are terrible at their job is they don't know how to communicate clearly and how to deal with conflict. And the key things you need in skill wise in as a pastor is clear communication and conflict management. And the thing in pastoral ministry, there's not like clear metrics. In my day job, there's clear metrics. I have goals to hit, right? I have to, and you can measure them. And if I don't hit them, there's real consequences. In pastoral ministry, like, you don't really, you could grow your church by being unfaithful, right? And like just telling people what they want to hear. And you can shrink your church by being faithful. And sometimes it grows because you're being, so you don't have like these clear matrix or metrics. Um, so that makes it really hard to be a pastor somehow. And that's why I think spending time in a world where you have to answer for your output. I used to want there to be some sort of metric I could judge myself in the pastoral ministry, and they're just really hard to come up with them. There's like little ones you can do. So I want to see guys spend time um, having to get things done. I don't care if it's building a brick wall, right, or it's hitting your sales goal that month. But that is something that requires drive and focus and productivity, sort of disciplines of time management and all that. I know a lot of pastors that sit around and read books for like 10, 15 hours a week. They're not even books that they're preaching on. And then the lecture guys who are working like 60 hours a week for coming a little bit late to a Bible study. Like, get over yourself, dude. Like, I just think that's crazy. And again, there's value in sitting around and reading books, I suppose, if you're going to write something, whatever. But I work, I work about 40 hours in my day job and another 20-ish hours, 35 hours, sometimes my day job to 40, and then 25 to 30 in the church. And I still read about a book a week, big whoop. You sit around on the people's dime, like laying on your couch, listening to baseball and reading into a book, giving guys a hard time. I mean, I've seen that happen. And so I want guys that can get things done, that can and stay cool under pressure. So much of ministry is staying cool under pressure. And you learn that out in the business world, or, when I was a landscaper, you got this big old tree and it's got the bulb at the bottom, and you got your bobcat out and you're digging a hole and you see rain clouds coming. Dude, you got to get that tree in the ground. When that bulb fills up with water, that thing's going to weigh so much, and it's going to be so hard to get in that hole. You just start moving quick. And then you stick it in there and you get it all done, and your muscles hurt and you got scratched up by branches and whatever. But you got the job done. You just learn to get things done. So sometimes you have to have 7-hour elders meetings, right? One of the elders committed adultery with like a 17-year-old, right? Like, that's chaos. You don't get to go home to your wife today. You're gonna sit down and we're gonna talk and we're gonna figure out how to solve this. And you're gonna have to work really hard. So I just want them to have real world experience and then come to the church and get interned, learn how to do elders meetings, like how to prepare an agenda, how to what happens on a deacon's board, how to tell someone their loved one just died, how to write a sermon for an unbelieving relative of one of your members that almost certainly went to hell, and now you have to preach a sermon at their funeral. How do you do that? What do you do when someone's kid just got ran over by a car and died? How do you deal with that? Marriage counseling. What do you do when you're like, this marriage shouldn't go forward? Like, how do you say that? I want them to spend time in a church seeing some of those things, and also go to seminary or something like seminary. I don't think it's good that people like, I'm self-taught. So what? Right? You didn't get to. You have to have your ideas tested. Everything has to be tested. So I'd like Greyfriars. I think has some of that model going on out there in Moscow. The way we want to do it at East River, because we think we can pull this off, is have people take a master's course at GPTS, Greenville Presbyterian Theological Seminary, where I went to, and then have them also serve alongside us for 3 years. And we'll push them hard. I always tell people, I'm not sure what sort of people listen to your podcast, so I don't know how much trouble I'm getting for my language. But I always tell people that a good ordination exam, you should piss blood the next day, right? When you go to your ordination exam, your brain sparks should start shooting out of your ears. It should be like 3 hours long, and they should push you to the very edge of yourself. And I could think at the end of I had 2 exams. I had my licensure exam. That was about 2.5 hours. My ordination exam under committee was 3 hours with guys like Joey Pipa and Rick Phillips, some names in the PCA, asking me every hard question you ever could think. And you come in, you got your confidence, you know everything. But after like about 2 hours in, you're starting to fail. And you're like, can I go use the restroom? Because if I give an answer right now, I think I might say heresy. Right. Don't take your phone with you. You can go use the restroom, but leave the phone, So, and then the next day, like, you know what? I did it. When they endorse you, did it, man. Right. Like these guys, you have to be able to outline any book of the Bible at command. You have to deal with, you have to be able to recite the confession and catechism on demand. You have to be able to answer any question about theological controversies, explain the sacraments, show that you're conversant with the BCO, which is the Book of Church Order, which is kind of how you run things in the PCA. And you do all that. And these men that are old and grizzled and been around and love the Lord say you did a good job, right? You put your time in. Then you're ready for like COVID. Bring it. Like I'm scared of you telling me I can't worship. If you saw what I had to do to go through it. So I want to recreate as much of these good things I experienced with flexibility. So it's not a great answer. I haven't worked it all out yet, but I'm just this is how I've been thinking about what guys need, and guys need to be ran through the gauntlet, right? It should be hard, and people should fail. There should be some people that come to the ordination exam and do not get ordained. If your denomination is always saying yes, like maybe you really all these winners, you're getting all the killers in the world. Like, good for you if you are, praise God. But like, why aren't you failing people? We should fail more people. People should know their stuff. People here's why we get the worst people in the world in ministry. It's because we have low standards, and they know they can get the respect of authority without having to work hard for it. You say whatever you want about a PhD. They still did 7 years of school. They still had so many stupid papers to turn in long nights and whatever. And not all PhDs are created equally, and certainly not all schools are. But that takes some time. Doctors and lawyers, we respect them because they had to pass some really hard tests. And ministers sometimes want the respect, but what do they do for it? Especially these guys that, they read a couple books and they interned somewhere for a year, and now they want you to treat them like they're a doctor or something. Once upon a time, being a pastor meant being excellent. And so we have to bring the prestige back to the ministry, and we do it by making it hard to become a pastor. Not impossible, but people say, oh, I don't have time to get a master's. You don't have time to go to school for 3 years to serve the Lord in one of the most important ways possible, right? You had time for all sorts of other things in your life. And so I'm not saying we have to require seminary. What I don't like about it is people not willing to put the time in and willing to struggle. That annoys me. And I think it shows a real low commitment and belief in the quality of the ministry.
Yep. Yeah, no, it reminds me back when I was maybe 15, became a lifeguarding course. First day, there's maybe 15 people there. Instructor takes a brick, drops in the deep end. Says, all right, nice. Everyone go get the brick. And there were people who failed out in that first 30 seconds, who showed up to become a lifeguard and couldn't pull a brick off the bottom of the pool. And it feels like there's parallels for ministry, but
heck exactly. Yeah, I want a lifeguard that I weigh more than a brick.
Yeah.
I'm just going to need two or three of those guys. So,
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, I think that's great.
I talked to a guy recently who wants to help young men take over uh, businesses so that small communities can achieve economic sovereignty. And he's a rancher by background. His family's in Texas, been here for a long time, and he was saying that he was thinking, how do you select the men to take over these businesses? He says, I don't, if it's I don't know, glass manufacturer, they don't need to have a glass background. They just need to be good hardworking men. So he's thinking about, if you want to be in the pipeline, then you have to go join his ranch. And if you can survive 6 months of ranching with him, then if you survive, then he will give you a business. He will buy you a small company. He doesn't care if you don't have background and whatever the specifics of the business are. As long as you can survive, you get up, you get up super early, you work 20-hour days, and you're breaking horses, you're doing this, that, and the other. Your body is broken. If you can make it through that, he was telling me, I will trust a guy who can get through that and buy them a business and let them run it, because they've proven that they can work through adversity and through hardship.
I love it. I think it's great.
Michael, kind of along these lines, so much of what you just talked about has to do with men being tested by men, or being in the gauntlet with other men, so getting into brotherhood. So patriarchy being diluted culturally, it's really hard to find good fathers, and fathers are rare and rare, good fathers, that is. And same parallel to that is sort of brotherhood. With lack of good fathers, lack of good men, lack of good brothers. How do you encourage guys in your company, guys that you work with, guys at your church, just men around you, to go develop or find brotherhood as it becomes more scarce?
Probably three components I think you probably have to have. Yeah, I'd say three. So time, interest, activity. So you have to put time in with men. There's just no way around it. And I get together on Tuesdays with a couple guys in my church, and it's kind of like a coffee and career group. That's not what we called it. That's just what it's turned into. We all are kind of uh, in the higher levels of our businesses, a little more further along, or breaking into leadership, or well in our way. And so I just sensed that some of those guys in my church were feeling disconnected. This is a gut. And so I called a few of them up and said, "Hey, how's it going? How do you feel?" And then that was exactly what was going on. I said, "Well, how about we do this? How about we get together on Tuesdays, and we'll just kind of go through Spiritual Leadership by Oswald Sanders, and chit chat. It doesn't have to be like a real hardcore study, but more of just that'll just anchor the conversation." And now we've been doing that for about, I guess, 4 or 5 months, and there's maybe a little longer, 6 months. We're really starting to make deeper connections. Like, we know about their troubles at work and some of the troubles at home, but at first it was just a little awkward, you know. But you put the time in, and you start to create friendships. That's why, like, most people create friendships in at work, or in late high school and college, because you spend so much time together, whether it's in the same classes or on the same sports teams. And if you look back at some of your friends, like we don't. It's weird who we end up being really tight with. So my best friend growing up, his name is Quinn Broomfield. We still stay in touch. But Quinn, he was a short black guy, really into sports and boxing and all this stuff. I did like boxing already, but I was like a straight comic book geek. I wasn't lifting weights yet. I was super awkward, easy to intimidate, really kind of brainy and smart. Read lots of books. I think by that time in my life, I'd read everything Stephen King had ever written. I just would read everything. And my mom's a big reader. I inherited that. I didn't know how to throw a football. I remember the first time I threw a football. I ran into Quinn. The way we became friends, we got assigned to each other in our science class. It was something about mixing different colors to get these different colors. And Beavis and Butthead was really big at the time. So we just mixed all the colors, because I think we saw it in an episode. So all our colors were brown. even though it was supposed to like mix the red with this to get that color, and then we got written up and sent to the office together. Then one day I saw him and realized he lived in the same neighborhood. He invited me over to throw the football. I had never thrown a football before. I was like 14 or something. So I threw the football like, like it's just the ball like rolls. So we start spending time together, and I was within a year. I was taking karate, and I was into jiu-jitsu and judo, and I wrestled. I played football. I ran track. I was on the swim team, through shot put. I got involved in all that sort of stuff. And he then became the inker for a comic book that we did together. He learned to listen to Stone Temple Pilots and Nirvana with me, and then I know all the '90s black R&B, right? Like I'd say I'm white chocolate, man. I'm like the blackest white guy, and I watched all those black movies, New Jack City, all that stuff from that time. And funny enough, my family was pretty messed up, but he had a really good functioning household. And very different. Like you walk in my house, it's kind of ratty, white trash. You walk into his house and there's like a typical black family. There's like giraffes and all these goofy like decorations that the black families really liked back in the '90s. Very different people. And it all started because we got assigned together in class. And then there was no one else from our school in our neighborhood. So what are you going to do? Well, you got to hang out with somebody, right? And so that was time together. And then we shared interests. Like I was really into all sorts of weird stuff at the time, and he was into sports. We both had boxing, and we started talking about shared interests, but introducing each other to those interests, and then building activities around them, and like spending time together doing stuff. And so a lot of guys, you're not going to become friends overnight. You got to put work into it. You got to try. So you got to say, hey man, you want to hang out, or invite people to help you into your life. That's another one. Hey, would you mind coming over to help me move? And then get to know them, or help me fix my car or whatever. I could just use someone there, moral support when I'm cussing or whatever. But and then interests. A lot of guys just are boring as crap, and they don't have any interests. They haven't like learned anything. What I like to ask guys are like, what's a skill you're learning right now? What's a new skill you're learning? And then try to invite them into activities. Those three things, those are kind of the cornerstone of brotherhood. And then the real deep level happens when that sort of meta mission, right? The missio Dei, the building things in your culture, like anchor, all that. And so you just got to put time in with people, invite them into your life, be an interesting person, right? Interesting is interested, and then spend time together doing actual things. That's kind of how it all happens, Josh came over and hung out with me and one of my business partners, didn't you?
That's true. We had a good time.
And that's just how we do it. That's like my normal life. That's how we build all sorts of friendships and get to know people. We just hang out and talk. And then the next time we're in town, like, hey, we're going over to this bowling place. You want to come with us? These things just kind of roll naturally. And I think the internet age is frictionless, right? When it comes to things like that, you can pretend there's like a little weird group for everybody. Someone's asked me once, like, what's your position on spousal corporal punishment? Like spanking your wife? So, and they're like, I was like, well, no, no, we don't do that. But that's not a movement. That's like 100 people out of like billions of people. You understand? Like the internet's got some weird niche for everything. And so, and then people also look for people like them. And relationships are weirder than that. You have to put yourself into it. So you have to be willing to kind of put yourself out there, and what starts awkward gets more natural, and you build these deep relationships that are wonderful. By the end of your life, the advantage I have on so many people is I have a lot of mentors and probably 5 really, really close friends, and then maybe 20, 30 pretty close friends. Like if I need someone to get me out of jail, sort of friends, people I could call. So if one doesn't answer, I could like hide and make another call, and I'd still get out. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's increasingly rare, especially I guess in cities. And we don't know. We talked a little bit with Aaron Wren about this, and you live in a small community. Josh and I both spent time in Moscow, which for all the listeners, this is Moscow, Idaho, not Moscow, Russia. But small town, 25,000 people, really tight knit community, lots of just a great community with lots of vitalism, lots of guys getting together. You know, everybody lives 5 minutes from each other, type of thing. It's conducive to a certain kind of intimacy in a good way
Yeah.
between households and men. That's hard to do when you're 40 minutes away from each other, whatever. Michael, we're getting to the end of our time, but I did want to ask. So going back to one of the very, very early things you said, your father told you when somebody was bullying you, just punch them in the face, make their eyes water a little. What would you say to your son if somebody is bullying him?
Well, it works. It'll make their eyes water. Yeah, gotta hit them, especially if they've never been punched in the nose before. You know, there's so many people that would do them a lot of good. Yeah, I tell my sons, there's a lot of little bones in your hand, and you don't want to punch people you don't have to. You know, that's one thing you learn. And if you've actually been in some street fights, and I've had my fair share when I was younger, it's usually best to avoid them. People, especially these days, people pick up a brick and hit you or whatever. But most bullies do back down if you stand up to them. But I teach my kids how to punch and how to throw. That, like Hudson's a black belt in karate, and all the other kids have been in that. We like to slap box, and wrestle. You know, I'll take on them. I'll jump on top of them at some point in a week and pin them down, and they're getting strong. They're getting really strong. Hudson's working on his deadlift and benching and all this stuff. He's just big. He's taller than me now, but I know what I'm doing better than he does. So I just tell him, yeah, stand up for yourself. But the goal is to win people, not to beat them. Right? What's better, beating a guy up or winning him to your side? And this is like what's so stupid about our time. Guys this is how these people are so short-sighted. Is everyone's willing to burn bridges so quick. But I rather win people to my cause and what I'm doing than to even win an argument with them. If winning the argument is part of winning them to my cause, I want to win the man. So stand your ground. Don't go nuclear. That's what I did. But I remember I threatened to hit a kid in his face with a lock in high school, and that's because I was picked on. And then when I hit high school, I wanted everyone to know that I was willing to go far. And I remember the kid just said, "Chill out, Foster," and that was that, right? And nothing ever happened, and I stood my ground, and then I kind of loosened up over time. And I like, one way to not get bullied is to look people in their eyes and don't drop your head. Walk with confidence. Stand your ground. Don't need to prove yourself all the time. If someone insults you, like, whatever, what's going to happen. Someone asked me the other day, "What do you do when someone disapproves of your ministry?" I was like in person? Like, no, online. I was like, nothing. I go on with life. Like, who cares? And with HUDs and all the boys, I'm like, stand your ground, guys. And if you gotta throw fists, throw them. But try to avoid it. Try to win the person. Try to learn how to. A lot of guys are just kind of testing boundaries, right? If they see you hold the boundary without make it into a bigger deal, you'll be amazed how many people you can win to your side. I think it's fun. I like being nice to my critics. I think it's hilarious. They don't know what to do. People will tell me to go to hell and how I'm a terrible person, and I'll email them back. I appreciate your feedback. Have a great day. So, and I don't appreciate the feedback, but I do hope they have a great day. They better, because judgment's nigh. But that's mine. Yeah, if you got to punch somebody, but that should really be one of those last sort of resorts. What's that one guy? That black guy. He's got that gray beard. He trains all those kids. He's I don't know if you've seen those videos. I can't think of his name right now.
Cave of Adullam guy.
Yeah. So he says,
Yeah.
you turn into the lion, but you reset the lamb, right? Like most people just need to know that you can go there, and you need to know that you can go there, right? You need to know that you're tough, and that you, if you have to throw down, you can. But the goal is not to be the toughest man in the room. The goal is to be the guy that gets things done and leads other. So yeah, be able to turn into a lion, but we're to be lambs in this world, and God works through us. He protects us. So yeah.
Awesome. Questions that we always ask our guests at the end, just our short ones. One's what we call sort of the kind of black pill question, like what's worse than most people realize, and specifically within the your area of expertise as you look at the world.
What's worse than most people realize?
That they should be aware of and like get rid
Oh,
of.
that they should be aware of. Well, the level of propaganda that manipulates you, even some of the content that you're absorbing that you think's good content, really is just telling you what you want to hear. And I think the lies you believe are much more. Well, here I'll give you an example. Like I hear people say, the way to be effective in this life is to be a postmillennialist. Is that what you see in the lives of most postmillennialists? That's not what I see, right? And so just know that there's a lot of, like, why do people say that? Should postmillennialism move someone to productivity? Absolutely. Are all postmillennialists productive? No. Come on. A lot of them are waiting for the world to fall in their bunkers with their beans and bullets to rebuild the golden new age. What I want to say is that there's a lot of content out there from well-intended people that is just kind of telling you the things you want to hear. So that's why if you want to know if it's propaganda or not, go visit their church, live among them, see it. So yeah, that's my black pill. My black pill for you is that a lot of this content is made by people that don't know what the heck they're talking about and are mocking other people. And the reason it's so popular is because it's what you want to hear. It's like, what's that guy? The guy that's telling you that China's going to fail? What's his name? Zehan? That guy that's got it all figured out. Did you see that guy on Joe Rogan? He's got an answer for everything. Anytime someone has an answer for anything, they're lying. And that guy, that's kind of like hopium for conservatives right now. Now, if he's right, good for him. But I don't know, man.
And on the other side, what's better than most people realize?
The We Made People podcast is going to be freaking amazing. It won't tell you. No, I'm just joking.
Yes.
What's better is the up and coming generation. I think there is a real stir in young people right now. I see young people getting married and having kids and embracing productivity and willing to do things. I'm actually very hopeful that we can turn a corner. I don't think we need the mass that some people imagine. We need a lot of people, right? You need bodies on the wall, but I'm very happy to see the number of families that have responded, especially to 2020, in a very good, non-bitter, black-pilled way. And our church is full of that at East River. At East River, we've had Methodists that 1 week were being taught by a feminist lesbian pastor, and then the next week come and join our church. And that's the sort of change that's happening right now. God is like waking people up. And I do think 2020 on, really even 2016 on, there's been an increase awakening. The sort of red pill idea has happened. But even better than it just being a red pill, I'm seeing it translate to actual things, actual institutions, actual companies, and people moving and building friendships. Like a lot of people in our church is about 325 people. A lot of our people they had to recreate all their friendships because they moved from all over the world, or they left churches over these like splits that we've had the last couple of years. And I'm watching these really tight relationships start to develop. So I'm very hopeful that God is moving in his church, and he is producing a generation that's going to build something and hand it off to the next generation, so they don't have to start from zero. I think that some of the things that we see in Moscow that they've done well out there, I think those things, there's little sanctuary cities like that popping up everywhere. Chris Wiley's doing that out in Battleground, Washington. We're doing it in Batavia. And I know of a lot of little communities that are doing it at a different scale. But there's a real move to go local, to dig deep, to do real things in the real world. And I think it's beautiful. And I'm confident that the church in America is not going to get zeroed out, and we are going to win. What shape America takes, well, you already asked the black pill question, so.
Yes. And for that, you can listen to first episode with Charles Haywood, and he has thoughts on that one.
It's going to balkanize, man. Sorry, go ahead.
Right. No, you're good. We could talk for hours on localism, propaganda, all this stuff. At some point, we'll have to have you back. But before you go, do you want to just talk very quickly about the We Made People podcast and where people can find that and what the podcast is going to entail?
You can go to wemadepeople.com, and we're just starting. My wife and I are starting a podcast. Em and I have done a lot. We've had babies at home, at hospitals. We've buried children. We've gone through attachment parenting. We taught some of our kids how to use the restroom with tell us sign language at 6 months old, that they had to pee, and we'd hold them over toilets. We did the cloth diapers. Then we realized it's okay to not do cloth diapers. We did all the healthy food. We fed them from Walmart for a long time. We've been poor. We've had money. We've been poor again. We've had money. We've almost divorced. And then we've now had a beautiful marriage for 17 years. We've had a lot of ups and downs, seen a lot of trends come through marriage, family, and sex. And we wanted a podcast that would focus a little bit more on principles and particulars, to kind of help those that are first generation Christians in particular navigate all the crazy content out there, some of which is good, some of which is, I think, a little more legalistic and paint by the numbers than it probably should be. And so we wanted a podcast that's just framed around the kids we had, how we, as two first generation Protestants, my wife grew up Roman Catholic, how we're building a productive household that'll last generations. So it's just kind of down to earth, and we try to be encouraging, and it's not pointless chit chat, but there is some chit chat for you lonely people out there.
Awesome. Beyond that, where else can people find you? You're on Twitter. What's your handle?
I'm just on Twitter. This is Foster. That's like one of the main places I am. You can find me on Facebook, but I'm to that 5,000 friend marker until I find the guy that wants me to donate to his charity, then I block him, and then I accept the next person. So really, Twitter is the place to find me.
There you go. And beyond that is It's Good to Be a Man on Amazon, correct?
Yep. You can go to Amazon, Canon Press. They always really appreciate if you buy it directly from them, but Amazon's good. And in the podcast, we're just going to keep up. You can listen to It's Good to Be a Man still on iTunes and anywhere where you find quality podcasts.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll put the Canon Press link on the show notes, not the Amazon.
Very cool.
Michael, thank you so much. This was awesome. Really enjoyed having you. I appreciate you.
All right. God bless. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.